I didn't know my life was about to split into a before and an after over a glass of red wine. 2 weeks ago, my fiance's family looked me in the eye and told me, politely, calmly, with smiles sharpened like knives, that I would never be good enough. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I nodded, stood up, paid the bill for everyone at the table, and walked out. What I did after that is what people can't stop talking about. My hands are still shaking as I think about it, not because I regret it, but because I'm still stunned that I had the power to do it at all. I'm Rena Cole, 29, and I work in operations for Cole Hospitality Development in Austin. It's my father Graham's company. We build hotels, big ones, the kind with glass lobbies, executive lounges, and contracts that keep entire businesses alive. And that night, sitting in a hill country winery 6 days before my wedding, I realized something brutal. The respect they showed me was conditional, and so was the contract I had fought to give them. When Randall Hale leaned back in his chair and said, "Rena, you're a nice girl, but you're not really on my son's level. This family has standards," I waited. I looked at Kevin, my fiancé, the man who had promised to spend his life with me, waiting for him to speak. He didn't. Instead, he stared into his wine glass, like the answer might be floating somewhere between the tannins and the silence. Then he looked up and said, almost casually, "Maybe we should just call off the wedding." 6 days before walking down the aisle. That was the moment something inside me went still. I didn't yell, I didn't beg. I placed my glass down carefully, walked to the host stand, paid the entire bill, every tasting, every appetizer, every smile, and left without saying goodbye. But here's the part that keeps replaying in my head. From my car in that parking lot, with my engagement ring still warm on my finger, I made one phone call to my father. And by Friday morning, the contract that had been keeping my future in-laws' company afloat, a $1.2 million deal, was gone. Terminated legally, professionally, irrevocably. Now my phone won't stop ringing. Their voices shift from confident shim to angry to desperate. And I keep asking myself the same question. Did I destroy a family business out of spite, or did I finally learn how to set boundaries? Before everything collapsed into that one sentence, "This family has standards," my life looked steady, predictable, safe. I was 29, working long hours in operations at Cole Hospitality Development, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I had found my footing. I hadn't grown up entitled, despite what people assumed about my last name. My father, Graham, built the company from nothing. I watched him miss birthdays, holidays, entire stretches of childhood because a project was behind schedule or a permit fell through. What he gave me wasn't privilege. It was a work ethic that bordered on obsession. I didn't even join the family business right away. After college, I took a job at a construction software firm. Long days, brutal deadlines, no shortcuts. That's where I learned how deals actually worked, how vendors cut corners, how contracts protected or destroyed people. That's also how I met half the hospitality and real estate development world long before I ever worked for my dad. I joined Cole Development 3 years ago, and even then, I made sure no one could accuse me of coasting. I worked operations, schedules, vendors, compliance, the unglamorous backbone of every successful project. That's where Kevin Hale entered my life. We met at an industry mixer in downtown Austin. He wasn't flashy, quiet confidence, well-dressed, but not trying too hard. He asked thoughtful questions about projects, about logistics, about me. I remember thinking how rare that felt. Most men I met either wanted my last name or felt threatened by it. Kevin didn't, or at least that's what I thought. He worked in commercial real estate, adjacent enough to my world that we understood each other's schedules, the stress, the constant pressure. Our first few months together were easy. Late dinners, long walks around Lady Bird Lake, conversations that drifted from work to childhood to what kind of life we wanted. When he proposed 7 months ago, it wasn't extravagant. No flash mob, no fireworks, just the two of us at home, nervous hands, a quiet question, and a ring I later learned he had agonized over for months. I said yes without hesitation. His parents, Randall and Bethany Hale, were polished. Randall owned Hale Mill Works and Design, a respected architectural millwork company known for beautiful craftsmanship, lobby panels, executive lounges, high-end finishes. Bethany was everywhere. Charity boards, fundraisers, luncheons. the kind of woman who made generosity feel performative. From the beginning, I sensed something underneath their smiles. Subtle things. Bethany asking what my parents thought of Kevin, never the other way around. Randall making offhand comments about legacy families and earning your place. Compliments that landed just slightly wrong. Still, I tried. I showed up. I smiled. I didn't correct assumptions. I believed love meant patience. Then came the San Antonio hotel renovation. When the bid packages were being evaluated, Hale Mill Works was struggling. Cash flow issues. Tight credit. They had laid off crews. I knew this, not because Kevin told me, but because I understood the industry. And when I advocated hard for them to get the lobby and executive lounge package, $1.2 million in work, I did it for two reasons. First, because Randall's craftsmanship was genuinely excellent. Second, because I was marrying his son. The contract was standard: quality control gates, progress payments, and a clause most people never thought would matter: termination for convenience, with an $85,000 kill fee. That contract saved them. Within weeks, Randall walked taller. Bethany started talking about upgrading our wedding. Suddenly, the budget Kevin and I had agreed on wasn't appropriate. Venues became too small, flowers too modest, guest lists too short. I ignored the warning signs. Because when you're in love, you tell yourself discomfort is just part of compromise. I didn't realize I was slowly being priced. Not as a partner, but as a resource. And by the time I understood that, we were already 6 days from the wedding. Looking back now, the warning signs were everywhere. They just didn't announce themselves loudly enough for me to stop the train I was already on. After Hale Mill Works landed the San Antonio contract, the shift in Kevin's family was subtle, but unmistakable. Conversations started revolving around appearances. Who would be invited to the wedding? Which donors Bethany wanted, seated near which city council members? What kind of impression our union would make? It was never framed as greed. It was framed as image. Bethany would lean across the table at brunch, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. "Rena, darling, people talk. You understand that. This wedding, it represents two families. Two families, not two people." Kevin and I had already agreed on a clean, elegant ceremony. A venue we loved, a budget that made sense. No debt, no spectacle. But every week, his parents nudged the boundaries a little further. A more exclusive caterer, imported florals, a guest list that ballooned with people neither of us knew. When I pushed back, Kevin didn't argue with me. He just retreated. "I just don't want them upset," he'd say, rubbing his temple like the stress physically hurt. "They mean well. It's only money." Only money, when it wasn't his. Meanwhile, I started noticing how differently Randall spoke to me in private versus in front of others. Compliments that doubled as assessments, questions that felt more like audits. "And your role at Cole, how much authority do you actually have? You handle operations, but final decisions still go through your father, right? Must be nice having that safety net." Each comment landed soft enough to deny, sharp enough to cut. The worst part was Kevin's silence. I waited for him to defend me, to draw a line, to say, "That's my fiancée, watch how you speak to her." But he never did. He would squeeze my hand under the table, a private apology disguised as affection. At work, things stayed professional. Hale Mill Works met their early milestones. Progress payments went out. Suppliers reopened credit lines. I watched their financial recovery in spreadsheets and status updates, while Bethany talked openly about expanding their home renovation plans. The connection was impossible to ignore. I started to feel evaluated, not as a partner, as an asset. And then came the wine tasting rehearsal dinner. Hill country, warm evening, soft music, everyone relaxed. 6 days before the wedding. We were talking about seating charts when Bethany stood up, tapping her glass with a smile, too rehearsed to be spontaneous. "We've found a better venue," she announced. "An estate. It reflects our family's standing more appropriately. 3 times the cost, non-refundable, immediate deposit required." I remember the heat rising behind my eyes, but my voice stayed calm. "We already agreed on a budget," I said, "and we're committed to the current venue." The silence that followed felt intentional. That's when Randall leaned back, crossed his arms, and decided to say out loud what had been hovering unspoken for months. And that's when I realized this wasn't about flowers, or wine, or weddings. It was about power, and they were about to make sure I knew exactly where they thought mine ended. The air changed the second Randall spoke. Not dramatically, not with raised voices or slammed glasses. It shifted the way a room does right before a storm, heavy, expectant, like everyone knew something irreversible was about to happen. He looked directly at me. No smile, no pretense. "Rena," he said, his voice calm in a way that felt practiced. "You're a good girl, truly. But let's be honest, you're not really on Kevin's level. This family has standards." For a split second, I thought I had misheard him. My chest tightened, like my lungs forgot how to work. I felt heat rush up my neck, a physical reaction I couldn't control. My fingers curled around the stem of my wineglass so tightly I was afraid it might shatter. I didn't respond. I turned to Kevin. This was the moment, the line in the sand, the point where he would either step forward as my partner or step back forever. "Kevin?" I said quietly. He didn't meet my eyes. He stared at his wine, swirling it slowly, as if buying time. The seconds stretched. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Then he looked up and said the sentence that detonated my future. "Maybe we should just call off the wedding." 6 days. 6 days before I was supposed to walk down an aisle toward him. The room went silent again. But this time it wasn't waiting. It was finished. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because something inside me had gone completely still, like a switch flipping off. I set my glass down carefully. I remember noticing how steady my hands were. No shaking, no tears, just control. I stood, walked to the host station, and paid the entire bill. Every tasting, every plate, every smile that had been aimed at me like a transaction. No one stopped me. No one followed. The night air outside felt sharp against my skin. I sat in my car for a long moment, staring straight ahead, my engagement ring catching the dashboard light. Then I made the call. "Dad," I said when he answered, "remember the termination for convenience clause in the Hale contract?" There was a pause, a long one. "Yes," he said carefully. "That would cost us money and create a logistics mess. Are you absolutely sure?" I didn't hesitate. "I'm sure." Friday morning, Cole Legal couriered the notice. Contract terminated, effective immediately, $85,000, kill fee, to be processed within 10 business days. By 10 a.m., my phone started ringing. I didn't answer, and that was just the beginning. The first voicemail came in around noon on Friday. Randall's voice was clipped, professional, like he was leaving a message for a subcontractor, not the woman his son had almost married. "Rena, there must be some kind of clerical error with this termination notice. Call me back so we can straighten this out." I listened to it once, then again. My stomach twisted, not with doubt, but with the sick realization that he still believed this was something he could fix with authority, that whatever had happened the night before was separate from business. By mid-afternoon, the tone changed. "Rena, the bank just froze our line of credit. We have materials on deposit. Crew's expecting payment. You need to call me back immediately." I pressed delete. The third voicemail came late Friday night. His voice was shaking. "We can't make payroll without the next progress payment. Please, call me back." That one I sat with longer. I won't lie. Part of me felt physically ill. These weren't abstract numbers anymore. They were people, workers, families. And for a moment, I wondered if I had gone too far. Then my mind pulled me back to that winery, to Randall's voice, steady and dismissive, to Bethany's satisfied silence, to Kevin staring into his glass while his father decided my worth. The goodwill had ended when the relationship ended. Kevin called at 10:47 p.m. I almost didn't answer. Something in my chest tightened when I saw his name, but I picked up. He was sobbing. "It was just a stupid fight," he said. "How could you destroy my family's company? Do you know how many people work for my dad?" I closed my eyes. "Kevin," I said quietly, "your family looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't worthy of you, and you agreed with them." "I didn't." "You did," I interrupted gently, "by saying nothing, by calling off the wedding." The crying stopped. And just like that, his voice changed, measured, controlled. "Look," he said, "we can explain this to your dad. Wedding stress. People fight. We can reverse the termination and work on fixing us." Fixing us. I asked him the question that had been sitting heavy in my chest for months. "Kevin, are you loving me or are you pricing me?" Silence. Then the line went dead. Saturday morning, Bethany showed up at my door. I didn't argue. I didn't interrupt. I just listened and recorded. Texas is a one-party consent state, and something told me I might need proof. She talked about the workers, about Christmas presents, about how devastated Kevin was, about how I was destroying a family business over a misunderstanding. Then she dropped it casually, like an afterthought. "Kevin is keeping the engagement ring. After what you've done, consider it compensation." I said nothing. But that was the moment I realized this wasn't over. And it wasn't just about a broken engagement anymore. By Monday morning, the shock had worn off, and what replaced it was something colder. Clarity. I was back at my desk when Cole Legal called. Their tone wasn't alarmed, just precise, the kind of voice people use when they've found something that doesn't belong. Rhina, the attorney said, while processing the termination paperwork, we noticed an irregularity. My fingers stilled on the keyboard. A change order. Number 4. A request for a $120,000 advance payment, supposedly signed by my father. The digital signature didn't match. The audit trail showed inconsistencies, timestamps that didn't align, approvals that never went through proper channels. They weren't accusing anyone, yet, but they had a responsibility. Notices went out, to Hale's bank, to their primary suppliers. Not criminal charges, just enough to make everyone cautious. By noon, my phone stopped ringing. The silence was louder. Wednesday brought an email I didn't expect, from Tom, the shop foreman at Hale Mill Works. 45, 20 years in the trade. The kind of man whose pride lived in the grain of the wood he worked with. Rhina, he wrote, I just quit. Randall told me to downgrade the wood grade to save money. It won't meet fire rating specs for public hotel spaces. I can't put my name on substandard work. He attached photos, packing lists, purchase orders, specifications missing, required certifications. I stared at the screen for a long time. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was safety, integrity, people. I forwarded everything to Cole Legal and our owner's representative. Quietly, professionally. I didn't post, I didn't leak, I didn't gloat. But information moves fast in construction circles. Within 2 weeks, Hale Mill Works was quietly removed from another contractor's approved vendor list. No announcement, no drama, just gone. Their bank moved them to special assets monitoring. Meanwhile, Bethany went nuclear. Neighborhood gossip, charity boards, Facebook posts painting me as a vindictive woman who used corporate power to punish a family for standing up to me. Cole Development issued one statement, and one only. Contract terminated for convenience per standard terms. Replacement vendor engaged. Project timeline maintained. The contrast spoke louder than anything I could have said. Then came the ring. I hired a civil attorney, separate from the business side. The demand letter went out. $9,500. Original appraisal attached. Kevin ignored it. So we filed in small claims court. And still I didn't feel triumphant. Just steady. Like I had finally stopped shrinking to fit someone else's expectations. The quiet after escalation is what almost broke me. Once the calls stopped. Once the gossip settled into background noise. Once the adrenaline drained. That's when the weight hit. At night, I lay awake replaying everything. Not just the winery, but the months before it. Every moment I'd swallowed discomfort to keep the peace. Every time I'd convinced myself that love meant being patient, flexible, understanding. I kept asking myself the same question in different forms. How did I let them reduce me like that? Why did I stay silent when I felt myself shrinking? It wasn't just about Kevin anymore. It was about a pattern I didn't want to admit existed. I had built my entire identity around being reasonable. The calm one. The woman who didn't make waves. The one who could take a comment meant to bruise and turn it into a polite smile. And somewhere along the way, I had confused endurance with strength. The ring hearing date arrived quietly. Fluorescent lights, folding chairs. Kevin showed up alone, representing himself. He looked thinner, tired. He spoke for 15 minutes about love, betrayal, emotional damages, about how I abandoned his family in their darkest hour. I watched him like a stranger. My attorney spoke for 5 minutes. Dates, receipts, appraisals. Kevin's own email admitting he kept the ring. The judge barely looked up. An engagement ring is a conditional gift, he said. No marriage means it goes back to the purchaser. 10 business days. When the ring arrived at my attorney's office a week later, in a cheap padded envelope, I felt nothing. No victory, no closure. Just sadness for the girl who once imagined a future tied to that piece of jewelry. Around the same time, I drove through Kevin's old neighborhood and saw a for sale sign on his parents' lawn. My chest tightened. I hadn't wanted this. But wanting something different doesn't undo consequences. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I finally let myself cry. Not for them, but for me. For how small I had been willing to become just to be loved. I didn't know it yet, but that was the bottom. And from there, the only direction left was up. The shift didn't come with fireworks or a dramatic realization. It came quietly, almost inconveniently, on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was standing in my kitchen, coffee going cold in my hand, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thanks for the referral. Got hired. Starting Monday. Tom." I stared at the screen for a long moment. I hadn't told anyone I'd done that. When Hale Mill Works collapsed into chaos, I had reached out, quietly, to the replacement vendor on the San Antonio project and recommended Tom and 2 other senior craftsmen. No announcement. No credit. Just a sentence. "These are good people. They do honest work." Seeing that message, something inside my chest loosened. For weeks I had been framed as the villain, the cold corporate woman, the vindictive ex-fiancé who destroyed a family out of pride. And yet, here I was, still acting in alignment with who I actually was. That mattered more than winning any argument. Around the same time, Cole Legal updated me. The cease and desist letter Kevin's parents had sent, alleging tortious interference, had been dismissed almost immediately. The response was simple, surgical, devastating in its professionalism. Reference Clause 14. Termination for convenience. No legal basis. No drama, no emotion, just process. That was when it finally clicked. I hadn't used power. I had simply stopped giving mine away. I started therapy that week, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand why I had spent so long tolerating treatment that made me feel small. We talked about boundaries, about conflict avoidance, about how women are taught that being agreeable is safer than being respected. I stepped off personal social media. 2 full months. No scrolling, no defending myself, no watching Bethany's carefully curated posts about resilience and faith. Instead, I walked. Ladybird Lake at sunrise, hill country trails on weekends. I volunteered with a nonprofit that repaired roofs for senior citizens. Real work, tangible impact. Hammer in hand, sweat on my back, nothing abstract about it. For the first time in a long time, my life felt grounded. At work, I led a 4-month rollout for a hotel chain in Denver. Clean execution, clear standards, no emotional entanglements. The project was a success, and I realized something uncomfortable but freeing. I was thriving without Kevin, without his parents, without their approval, without shrinking. That realization wasn't loud, but it was irreversible. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They unfolded slowly, quietly, like gravity finally doing its work after someone steps off a ledge. Hale Mill Works didn't collapse in a single dramatic moment. Projects dried up. Credit stayed frozen. Vendors stopped returning calls. Within 4 months of the contract termination, the company shut down completely. Randall signed a civil settlement with one of his suppliers to avoid a lawsuit that would have buried him. Bethany stepped down from every charity board she once ruled. No speeches, no farewell luncheons, just quiet resignations and polite statements about focusing on family. Their house sold below asking price. They moved into a rental townhouse across town. Kevin pivoted, like he always did. PR for a yoga studio, new headshots, new narrative. As far as I know, he never tried to contact me again. And strangely enough, I didn't feel relief. Watching it happen was harder than I expected. Because even when someone hurts you deeply, seeing their world unravel doesn't automatically bring peace. It brings complexity, mixed emotions, the uncomfortable truth that accountability can still hurt to witness. At a family dinner, my father said something that stayed with me. "Family first," he said, then paused. "But process first, too. You honored both." I nodded. I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady. A few weeks later, I stopped by the San Antonio hotel. The lobby renovation was nearly finished. Tom and the new millwork crew were installing the final panels. The craftsmanship was flawless. Every joint clean, every finish exactly to specification. Built to last. Standing there, I realized something important. What I had protected wasn't my ego. It was standards, safety, integrity. And those things matter, whether in business or in love. The last time I saw the ring, it was sitting in my attorney's office under fluorescent lights, resting in a small plastic bag, like evidence from someone else's life. I didn't put it back on. I sold it a month later and used part of the money to furnish my new apartment near Ladybird Lake. A couch I loved. A bookshelf that finally held more than work manuals. A place that felt like mine, not a shared future waiting to collapse. I kept therapy, not because I was still angry, but because I didn't want to repeat the pattern. I wanted to understand why I had equated endurance with love, silence with maturity, shrinking with compromise. I learned that boundaries aren't punishments, they're filters. They don't keep people out, they reveal who doesn't belong. One afternoon, months later, I walked through the finished San Antonio hotel lobby. Sunlight spilled across the wood panels Tom and his crew had installed. Everything was exactly as specified, exactly as promised. My phone buzzed. "Do good work, Tom." I smiled, because that's all I had ever asked of anyone, including myself. Kevin's family once told me I would never be good enough for their son. They were wrong. The only thing I needed to raise wasn't my value, it was my boundaries. And once I did that, everything else fell into place. If you've ever been made to feel small by people who only respect power, remember this. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you exactly who they are before you build your life around them. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourselves.